The religious love to claim that we're mad at their imaginary friends when that is simply not true. It's a desperate lie they have to tell themselves if they have any hope whatsoever of sticking around one more day. I think it's hysterical to watch, and today we're going to finish out a video series that shows that very clearly. So let's get to it. We're back one last time with Brian Holdsworth as he asserts that atheists are angry at his God when we don't believe his God is real in the first place. The religious can never admit to that simple truth, can they? It's all just a way to comfort the other believers because they've got nothing else of substance to say. It's undeniable that more people than ever reject their silly ideas about their gods, and they just can't handle it because they are irrational and overly emotional, so they just make stuff up to keep the faithful in place. I mean, 4,500 Protestant churches closed in 2019, the last year that we have available data for. According to Pew Research in 2020, 64% of Americans identified as Christian, with 30% classed as religiously unaffiliated. Atheists. Only 6% are some other religion. By 2070 at the latest, and I don't think it's going to take that long, the religious will be in the vast minority, and I think it's going to come a whole lot faster than that. They have to make up lies to cling to the ones stupid enough to remain, otherwise they're all going to be out of a job. And won't that be a wonderful thing?
How can you say that if the physical universe is all that there is? Like, if I were playing a video game and it had fixed rules and code governing those rules, and something happens that I don't really like in the game, I might object and say that, yeah, it shouldn't have been configured that way, should have been a different way. But when I do that, I'm appealing, perhaps in a futile way, to the game developers.
I let that run on for a little bit just to get us back into the swing of things. But he, like a ton of other apologists, is looking at the situation entirely wrong. Life isn't a video game. There are rules behind the scenes, but nobody designed it that way. It just is what it is. If people complain about how life goes, that's completely irrelevant. Life just is what it is. If there are people that do you wrong, then you can go and take that up with them. But complaining about gravity or the speed of light or anything like that, that's just stupid. Some people just like to complain. That doesn't make those complaints rational or valid or intelligent. Now, yes, that is the problem because a lot of people, perhaps even most people, they're not rational. But people like Brian Holdsworth, they just revel in it. They ask ultimately irrelevant questions, and then they look for an emotionally comforting answer, and that's not really something that you can do. The answer is the answer, whether you like it or not. Hell, you may not even get an answer. You may never understand the answer. The answer for a lot of questions is, I don't know, and neither do you. Grow up and deal with it.
I'm saying they should have done this differently, but if there was no game developer, if the game was all that there was, on what grounds would I have to say it should have been made differently?
It doesn't matter what you say, because the game, in big air quotes, it just is what it is. You're here. Learn to deal with it. Learn to deal with it as it actually is, not how you wish it was. If you can actually determine how it is, that is, because there's no guarantees of that. There is no how it's supposed to be, because that's not even a thing. If you get dropped naked and afraid on a deserted island somewhere, screaming at the sky, it's not fair and this is not how it's supposed to be, that's completely irrelevant. It is how it is. Now, grow up and deal with it, or you're going to be dead. You have to deal with the reality that you actually find yourself in, whether you like it or not. And far too many people would rather whine than just grow a pair. Now, to go off topic just a little, this is where I think the modern world is kind of doing us dirty, at least in the Western world. Most people, they go through life without ever facing any real serious hardship. Everything is pretty easy, to the point that when people inevitably complain, it's really about something really minor and pointless. You know, first world problems and all that. Now, I'm not saying that we should make life harder necessarily, but when people have too much time on their hands and are not worried about their own survival, then they have nothing better to do than just noodle their navels, and you'll wind up with a lot of very weak-willed and weak-minded individuals who spend way too much time worrying about how things should be, and not nearly enough time dealing with how they are. And I think that's really pathetic.
That would be an entirely irrational sentiment. And atheists who express outrage about their moral misgivings are basically doing this. To rephrase Chesterton's remark, the worst moment for an atheist is when he is really angry about some injustice and has no one to direct his complaint.
Except injustices, by and large, are derived from people, and we can certainly complain to people or about people or do something about the people who perform those injustices. We can hold those people accountable to the social norms and mores of the society in which we live. I agree that screaming at the clouds is meaningless and stupid. The religious, they do that all the time. They just pretend that there's a God living up there someplace, listening to their complaints, but it's really essentially doing the same thing. It's not dealing with the world that you're in. It's complaining because you really wish it was a different way. Well, too damn bad for you, because that's not how reality works.
All he can do is just shake his fist at the sky and never get any satisfaction for it, because according to his own beliefs, the sky will neither listen nor care, making it an irrational thing to do.
Which is why the religious made up gods in the first place. First, it was to explain things that they had no actual explanations for, at least in that moment, and humans tend to be a very inquisitive species. Secondly, though, it was to give them somebody to bitch at. But life's not fair. Make it better. Yeah, and nothing ever happens, which is why the religious have all the excuses they do to explain why God never comes through. God just says no. No, there's no evidence for any God. Reality just went on about its business and ignored your whining completely because reality doesn't give a shit about you. They just don't like that. Not that it matters, because reality isn't listening to you. It has no capacity to listen to you. You are not important. Your ego doesn't mean a damn thing. You need to grow up and deal with it. Or don't. I don't care. Just shut up because I'm tired of listening to you whine. You're just being a dumbass prick. Maybe try to be better than that. It can only help.
But if you feel this relentless impulse to judge the events that occur within space and time and say they should have been otherwise, which I would argue that every single human being has done.
Not me. Perhaps for things that other intelligent agents are responsible for, since they actually had a choice, but never for nature itself. Now, where I live, we've got very, very strong winds, especially in the spring and fall. Less than a year after we bought this house, the roof got damaged by sustained winds above 70 miles an hour. Did I sit there and scream at the sky and say, "That's not fair"? No, I put a new roof on the house, one with hurricane-rated shingles that won't come off until it gets to at least 130 miles an hour. I got a really nice roofer who had done work with people I knew, and in 2 days I had a brand spanking new roof that hasn't moved an inch in the past 6 to 7 years. The same winds blew down my gate before escrow closed. I didn't complain. I didn't scream it wasn't fair. I went out and I built a brand new gate, much stronger than the one we had before. I don't get people who complain about reality. People? Sure, go ahead, complain about people, but the real world? What the hell's the point?
Isn't that evidence that there is something more than space and time? Isn't that evidence of a moral law that indicates that somehow the material world we live in is not realizing its fullest potential?
No, that's stupid. All it proves is that some people are really, really dumb. You know, people like you. Human irrationality isn't proving that your imaginary friend exists. You'd need actual evidence for that, and sadly for your side, you've got none. All he's really doing is saying some atheists, and I don't think it's a lot of them, although certainly there are some, but some atheists do it too, therefore everything I believe is right. No, you're an imbecile. You've got nothing to be proud of, Brian, and plenty to be ashamed of. Of course, he's just making this video for his followers who are primed to believe all the insane, unsupported crap that he does because it's emotionally comforting, but it shouldn't be. Honestly, people shouldn't be this dumb. This goes across the board. I don't care what makes you happy. I care what evidence you have to present for the things that you believe. And as we all know, these people have evidence for nothing. Nothing at all. They just really want it to be true. But wanting stuff to be true doesn't mean it actually is true. And if you believe stuff is true, that isn't actually true, that isn't actually defensible, that isn't actually evidentially supported, then you're a fucking moron. Knock it off.
And if so, well, then what is that potential if not something that exists outside of space and time?
It's just human stupidity and wishful thinking. There is nothing real there to point at. It's just what you really wish was true. It's what you want to believe. But that doesn't mean anything, does it? That's the whole problem, because what you want to believe is irrelevant. Nobody cares about you. You don't matter, and a ton of people out there have a real hard time dealing with that. You are a momentary blip in billions of years of universal history. You mean absolutely nothing in the grand scheme of things. You will be forgotten because you weren't important in the first place. And that's another thing that a lot of people have a real hard time getting through their heads. But it's true. You are one of billions and billions and billions and billions of evolved animals that popped up on this planet for the blink of an eye, and when you're dead, you will be completely irrelevant. You will be completely forgotten, unless you did something famous or more likely infamous, and then a couple of generations might remember you, and then you'll be gone. Nobody actually cares. You will be recycled into the raw materials for future generations of evolved animals and plants and other stuff like that. Just because you're looking for momentary comfort in the short time that you're actually here, that doesn't mean that any of it is actually true. Grow the hell up already. It's really not that hard.
It makes way more sense to believe in the supernatural, which is that which transcends and exceeds the natural or the physical universe, when we are held captive by these kinds of sentiments. We, on a daily basis, we can't avoid doing that.
It's actually pretty easy. I don't know what the hell's wrong with you, but I can do it just fine. You've got the problems, not me. I'm just fine. You're fucked up. Why would I believe in anything that has no evidence to support it? There's no reason to think that anything beyond nature actually exists. That is the only thing we have any evidence for. I don't care how the idea makes you feel. I care if it's actually real. And sadly, people like Brian here, they don't. They don't care at all. And this is why these people are such ludicrous idiots. They are not concerned with actual demonstrable reality. They don't want to learn as much real stuff as they can in the short amount of time they have here. They'd much rather waste their time on made-up bullshit because they're just not smart enough to know any better, or care. This is really embarrassing, but this is religion we're talking about, right? They don't know any better, and they don't care if they're true. They don't care if they're right. They don't care about anything but their own emotional comfort. They would much rather lie to themselves and others for that momentary dopamine drip in the head than they would to admit to the truth and honestly seek out the reality that they actually live in. These people are complete idiots, and I trust no one is surprised.
If you think the problem of pain is unresolvable, that doesn't mean that the supernatural or that God doesn't exist, just that you aren't morally aligned with it or with Him.
No, it means you're just delusional. There's no evidence for any of that. It's all stupid crap that you made up in your head because it makes you feel good. And that's the problem with all of these people. They just want to believe, but their epistemic standards are so ludicrously low as to be completely laughable. This is stuff he really wants to be true. But my imaginary friend is real. If you can't see him, then the problem is with you, not with me. No, it's you. You are the problem. You are an idiot. You are not remotely concerned whether your beliefs are in keeping with factual reality or not. In fact, you're so terrified of factual reality that you've retreated into an imaginary happy land in your head where the real world is not allowed. That doesn't say anything good about you and your questionable mental state. Stop being a dipshit. You can be better. You have to be better. Because when we look at you people, and we look at you people a lot around here, it's really, really hard to be worse.
But you can at least then level your complaint in a rational way rather than just denouncing the universe of which you are a mere contingent part.
Just like you are, but that's not good enough for you because it hurts your precious little fee-fees. So you invent this magical man in the sky to bow down to because it makes you feel better about your irrelevant place in the actual universe. That makes them sad, so they insist that the actual state of reality can't be real because their sadness matters more to them than the actual facts do. Their own made-up version is just so much more comforting. But comfort doesn't mean a damn thing in the grand scheme of things, does it? That doesn't make any of it true. And that's why we're actually here, to establish truth, to test various claims to see if they are in fact true. And that requires evidence, not faith. Faith leads only to delusion. It does not lead to demonstrable truth. It does not lead to an understanding of actual fact. Stop being such a complete imbecile, Brian. It's really not a good look.
And of which doesn't care about your complaint.
Who cares if anyone cares? You made up your own imaginary friend so you could have somebody to bitch to. But that doesn't make any of it real, does it? I have a feeling this is just another made-up tall tale, which we see a lot of from the religious all the time. The atheists are complaining, and that makes a good topic for a video, so I'm just going to make some shit up and make a video. So he just makes up all the elements that fit in with his pre-existing beliefs, and off he goes to the races. Except, I generally don't see atheists doing what he claims that they do. Certainly, I never do it. Let me know in the comments if you ever do, because this is just another tall tale told to those who already believe because he knows it's going to get him clicks. Seriously, I can't be the only person in the world who doesn't care about any of that, can I? Can I? And if so, that's really, really sad.
Can I ask you to stick around for one extra minute? Because if you enjoyed that, well, first of all, thanks for watching.
I didn't. I thought it was laughable, just like all of your content. Just like all religious content. Of course, that is what we're here for, pointing out just how dumb these people are and just how asinine their beliefs actually are. So I guess there is some value in that. I don't really know what's sadder, the fact that these people are serious about what they post, or the fact that they don't understand that everyone outside of their silly cult is just laughing at them. But sure, let's see what your conclusion is. If it goes into advertising or begging for money, I'm just going to put a stop to it. But right now, I admit I am kind of curious. So go ahead, hit us with your best shot.
But now I could really benefit from your help.
And that's the end of that. It's always about begging for money, isn't it? Money always comes into it somehow. No, why don't you go out and get a real job? I'm not giving you or your sponsors any of my support or any of my time, and certainly none of my money. Screw you. So that was kind of the end of that, which is a little disappointing because that makes this video a bit shorter, but hey, you win some, you lose some. The problem with all of this is that they're not saying anything intelligent. It all relies on already believing all the silly, unsupported crap that the people like Brian already believe because they really want it to be true. Anybody who has any questions about any of this will just walk away disappointed because Brian, like the rest, they have no real answers. He only has claims and wishful thinking and blind faith, and none of that will ever be enough. And that's why the theists that show up down in the comments, they do so poorly because they too have to assume that all of their faith-based nonsense is worthwhile when none of it ever is. And that's why they're often one-hit wonders. They show up, they preach, and when that doesn't work, they run for the hills, probably back to people on their own side, so they can lie and pretend that they made a good showing of it. But they don't though, do they? Not one of them ever does. Instead, we get a whole bunch of, but you don't understand. No, I do understand. I understand just fine. You're the one who doesn't understand that just because you believe a thing, just because you have faith in a thing, just because you really want that thing to be true, that doesn't mean that thing is true. It doesn't mean it's reasonable, rational, and it doesn't mean it's consistent with the facts. That's why we ask for evidence, and they simply don't have any. That's why they just make stuff up like Brian Holdsworth presumably did. It's just baldly rationalizing his way back to the stuff that he already believes for emotional reasons because he really likes it. I don't care what you like. Nobody cares what you like. And I'm sure he can't understand why his videos get downvoted so much. It's because nothing that he's saying is remotely intelligent or defensible. He just wants to believe. But wanting to believe is not now, nor will it ever be, good enough.